Hello everyone, welcome to AS and A-Level Biology with Dr. Demi. I am Dr. Demi, and in this video I am doing something that is not in the syllabus but I believe will help the students and anyone who's interested in understanding how vaccines work to just gain an understanding, revise content, and also see how the knowledge you gain in biology applies in real life. So I hope that you find this video helpful. It's obviously a good one to have at this time when the COVID-19 vaccine is being rolled out and so many people are hesitant. And it's not that that's a new thing. People have always been hesitant about vaccines. But what I hope to do in this video is share the scientific facts on how vaccines work and sort of just help you gain an understanding of how it functions so that you maybe make an informed decision and you're not so afraid based on the conspiracy theories that are floating around out there. I also thought of doing this video because when I was teaching in the classroom, this is something my students and I would have discussed, and so I hope that you guys also find this helpful. It's usually some of our segue discussions that help students gain a better understanding of the content that they're learning and how that would apply in the general real world. So I want to give some of you guys who have subscribed to my channel and those who are just stumbling on it for the first time a similar experience, and I hope that you find this very helpful. Okay, so what are vaccines and why are they such a big deal? Vaccines are what we can call biological preparations, and what they do is they activate acquired active immunity in vaccinated persons. What does that mean when I say acquired immunity? Acquired immunity means it's immunity that you gain not from a natural infection, but from maybe being injected with antibodies or maybe being injected with a vaccine, or even just having immunity that comes from breastfeeding, for example. That is acquired immunity. So acquired immunity means you get it from outside your body. You also have natural immunity, which comes from inside your body. And natural immunity is what you get when maybe as a child you go outside, you play in the sand, you encounter all kinds of pathogens, and your immune system naturally learns how those pathogens work and then is able to protect you in future should you get reinfected. When we say immunity is active, it means that the immune system is stimulating a response to a pathogen. You can also have passive immunity, and an example of passive immunity is breastfeeding. Again, if you breastfeed from your parents, you get antibodies that then protect you. If you breastfeed from your mother, you get antibodies that protect you and keep you from certain kinds of conditions, but those antibodies are not necessarily active unless you get infected with the pathogen against which they protect. So vaccines help to stimulate what we call a primary immune response. They register a foreign antigen with the body's immune system. So you will learn that there's a part of the immune system that's called the memory cells, and what the memory cells do is that they take note of every pathogen that invades your body and they keep a record of it so that if it invades your body again, the immune response is a lot faster and it can save your life because it can prevent you from developing very chronic symptoms that might even lead to death. So that's what the immune system does, and that's what vaccines do. They help to stimulate the primary immune response. I would advise, if you're a student and you're watching this video but you haven't watched the videos I did on chapter 11, please go to the playlist function and check out chapter 11 because in there it is a little bit more detailed. With this video I want to keep things very simple because I'm not doing it just for students, but I'd like anyone who's just interested in how vaccines work to understand them. So how do vaccines help? I love this graph in particular that shows what we call the primary immune response and the secondary immune response. I'm going to use a blue pen here so that it is discernible, but look at this graph here. So for example, over here you have concentration of antibodies. Now, some cases when you are infected with a pathogen, your body will stimulate what we call the B cells to produce antibodies, and those antibodies will then clump around the pathogen or react with the pathogen in certain ways so that the pathogen can be destroyed by your killer T cells. But again, I don't want to go into too much scientific detail. If you're interested in that detail, please check out the chapter 11 playlist. What I do want you to understand is this graph and how it works. So say for example, your body has never ever seen the flu virus. You've never been infected, you've never caught the flu. and then one day, for some reason, the flu invades your body. What's going to happen in that case is that your body, because it has never seen this, will not know how to respond to it. And so it is going to take a long time for your body to develop the antibodies that are correct for the flu virus. And in that time, you are going to develop possibly very severe symptoms. Obviously, not everyone would develop that, but in some cases you might develop very severe symptoms, and in some cases people do die from the flu. But eventually, rather, your body will have this primary immune response, primary being the first immune response. And what that means is that it is finally able to make antibodies against the flu. Even though the antibodies might have low affinity, they're able to sort of maybe fight off the flu a bit. What then happens is your body will take that knowledge of the flu virus and pass it to what we call the memory B cells. So I'm not going to write memory in full detail. I'm just going to write it as the mem B cells. The memory B cells will then study the virus and then keep it as a memory. They will learn about how it looks on the outside, its mode of action, and then keep it as a memory. In any case you get exposed to the flu again, as we all do at certain parts of the year, if you get exposed to the flu again, what will then happen is that your body, because of these memory B cells, will remember we've seen this guy before and we know how to fight this guy. And so the immune response will be a lot faster. So if you look at this now, look at the primary response. It took so much time. So I'm just going to label this X1 over here. It took so much time for the primary immune response to be initiated. But now look here, between the secondary exposure and the secondary immune response, the time is very, very little, because your body knows how this pathogen looks like, so it's able to stage the response immediately. And as a result of that, many people might get infected again with a certain pathogen but would not have any symptoms at all. I know people who would say to me, for example, I feel like I have the flu but I don't have any symptoms. Like, yeah, it's flu season and I do feel a little bit wheezy, but I'm not sneezing, I'm not blowing my nose, I don't have a sore throat. There are many things that I don't have. And usually I say to them, well, in that case, your secondary immune response is probably fighting very hard for you. So that is how it works. So in the case of vaccines, what they do in that case is that they stimulate this primary immune response, especially with a pathogen you have never seen before. Then it would be a primary immune response. They stimulate that so that when you get infected again, your body is able to respond a lot quicker and prevent any fatalities that might occur. This over here with this infogram, or this diagram rather over here, is just to show you how this happens. So for example, this stimulus would be the pathogen infecting the cell. The cytokine producing cell in this case is called the T cell. It's the helper T cell. So again, if you want more detailed scientific biological information, please check chapter 11. But the helper T cell here is what it's called. It helps the immune system. When there's an invasion and the helper T cell recognizes it, it produces what we call cytokines. Cytokines are like what you might also call ligands. And I think we discussed ligands in chapter 4. So again, have a look at that if you have forgotten. And what these ligands will do is that they will go and bind to other cells. So they might bind, for example, to the B cells. The B cells are the ones that produce antibodies, and they're also the ones that memorize pathogens. The B cells in this case would then stimulate the production of antibodies based on the information these cytokines are carrying. So the cytokines act like a signal, like a messenger of some sort. They're saying, hey, this is what is happening based on what the T cell is saying. And the B cell says, oh, okay, if that's the case, let's respond in this way. So it's a very organized system that helps to keep you alive. Now, there are lots of diseases that are eradicated and controlled by vaccines, and I think I'll go into a little bit more detail very soon. But just letting you know, for example, smallpox, measles as well, polio, tuberculosis, yellow fever, cervical cancer, genital warts. These are some of the diseases that have been that have had vaccines developed for them and have helped to prevent their spread within regions, or to reduce their spread within regions. So vaccines again are very helpful because they do help to keep the body alive and functioning. So there are different types of vaccines, and this is where things get interesting, because based on the type of COVID vaccine that has been developed, there have been very interesting theories, and in this video I'm going to debunk some of those, but with scientific facts. So not simply telling you, well, this is what I think, but just telling you the biological facts of how vaccines work. So you can have what we call an inactivated vaccine. An inactivated vaccine is a killed version, so it's already dead, of a killed version of the pathogen. So the pathogen is already dead, and because it's dead, you can introduce it into the body, and again that stimulates. Even though it's dead, the body still sees it on the outside. So think of it this way, and I think we discussed this again in chapter 11 where we discussed autoimmune diseases. On every cell we have what we call antigen shapes, okay? And this is why, by the way, blood groups matter, because if you have a blood group that is maybe, for example, a certain type, you can't take blood from someone else. So if you're blood group A, you can't get blood from blood group B. You can only get from A and from O. And the reason is because on your cells, there are these things called antigens. So we're just going to draw them like spikes like that. And obviously they can be of different shapes. But basically on your cells, these are there. In the same way they are on your cells, they are also on pathogens. So even if the pathogen is dead, if it's an inactivated pathogen, it's dead, it still looks like this on the outside. And it's introduced into the body, and the body is then able to stimulate an immune response, because again, when your body sees any foreign particle, an immune response will be stimulated. Examples of this, for example, would be if you go out into a dusty area to run. Your body considers dust that invades your body as a foreign particle, and you then get an immune response which might require you to sneeze, might require you to blow your nose. If you get it into your throat, might require you to cough, because a lot of mucus would try to trap that, and that makes you want to cough. So this is inactivated vaccines basically. It goes into the body stages an immune response, and as a result of that, the body learns what it looks like and is able to act against it should the live version invade the body. The thing with this vaccine type though is that it is not as strong. The immunity you get from it is not as strong as what you might get from a live vaccine, and so you might need booster shots. But this is the vaccine that is typically used for things like flu, polio, rabies, and even hepatitis A. Another example, another type of vaccine is the live attenuated vaccine. So when we say something is attenuated, it means that it is a weaker version of what the pathogen actually is. So it's a weakened form of maybe a virus, for example. And what this live attenuated vaccine does is that it can give you lifelong protection, because it's very similar to a natural infection. Injecting you with a live attenuated vaccine is sort of similar to saying go and play outside and then you encounter that pathogen. But of course, if you go outside to play, the chances might be a bit slimmer. So if you wanted to target a certain pathogen, you can use a live attenuated vaccine. And this has been used for things like measles, for yellow fever, and even for smallpox. You also have what we call recombinant vaccines. These are sometimes called the conjugate vaccines, and what these do is that they take a specific part of the pathogen. So it might be like if you're dealing with a virus, and again, if you want to learn about the structure of a virus, check out this video in chapter 1. If you're learning about a virus, you know that it has what we call a protein coat and a capsid. This is typically what a virus looks like. So on the inside, there's like DNA or RNA. It has a protein coat, and obviously it has its little things on its surface. Okay, so what recombinant vaccines might do is that they might take a specific portion of that of that vaccine and introduce it into the body, of that virus rather, introduce it into the body, and as a result of that stimulate again an immune response. You also have what we call the toxoid vaccines. Toxoid vaccines are very interesting because what they do is they contain the toxin. So if you are infected, say for example, by a bacterial pathogen that produces a certain toxin, and that toxin then results in you developing the disease, what this vaccine, the toxoid vaccine, can do is that it introduces that toxin into your body so that the immune cells are able to fight against the toxin. Now, I know when you think of a toxin, you probably think of, a tiny liquid, but everything you see around you has some sort of structure. So even that toxin itself would have its own structure. And so when it goes into the body, there's immunity that is created against the toxin and not necessarily against the virus that carries it or the bacterium that produces it. This is often used to prevent conditions like tetanus, for example. Then you have viral vector vaccines. Viral vector vaccines are vaccines that use a modified version of a different virus to bring about protection. So I'm not going to go into too much detail in this, but what it basically does is that the virus, say for example, you're trying to fight Ebola, you can then take the flu virus, modify the flu virus a bit by having it carry the instructions for Ebola or what Ebola looks like. And so you introduce that flu virus into the body. When that gets into the body, it will take the instruction to the cells of the body, and the cells will then say, oh, so there's a guy that looks like this that might invade us, and they prepare an immune response based on that. So that's how viral vector vaccines work, and some of them were used to stop the spread of Ebola in regions where Ebola was ravaging the society. The last one is messenger RNA vaccines, which is what we are using for COVID at the moment for some of the producers like Pfizer, and so I'm just going to explain a little bit about that. So if you think of mRNA vaccines, you might be thinking, oh my goodness, what is that? Now, I want you to go back to chapter 6 where we discussed protein synthesis. We know, for example, that your DNA is inside your nucleus. So I'm going to show that picture later for those who are not taking biology, but your DNA is inside the nucleus and it contains all the instructions for everything that you look like. So for your eye color, for your skin color, for your hair color, all of that is contained inside your DNA, even for your ability to digest certain products, maybe like lactose. Some people are born lactose intolerant. Your ability to maybe make melanin in your skin. All of that is carried in the DNA. But the problem here is that the DNA doesn't leave the nucleus. It's hidden inside the nucleus. It's sheltered in the nucleus. And so what happens is that for us to be able to keep making these things that keep us alive and keep us the way that we are, we have a protein called RNA polymerase. And again, please watch chapter 6 so that you get an understanding of this. But what RNA polymerase does is that it goes into the nucleus, it copies the information on the DNA and comes out as mRNA. So that's messenger RNA. So it's basically carrying the message from the DNA and bringing it out of the cell because the DNA cannot leave the cell. That messenger RNA is what the Pfizer vaccine, I believe, is using because it's an mRNA vaccine. I'm not sure if Moderna is also an mRNA vaccine. I believe that it is. I can't remember rather. But what will happen is that that mRNA that comes out of the nucleus is then introduced to the ribosome. So in the case of the vaccine, with that knowledge sort of gotten, in the case of the vaccine, the mRNA is being injected into the cell directly. The mRNA then goes into the cell. It would go straight to the ribosome. So it doesn't invade any cells. It goes straight to the ribosome. And what the ribosome will do is that it will translate this information on the mRNA into a sequence of amino acids. Once those amino acids have been sequenced, they will go into this part of the cell here on the second image called the Golgi body, where they will be modified and folded. So in the case of the COVID virus, this mRNA is simply coding for what the virus looks like on the outside. That's why they say it's coding for the spike protein on the outside of the virus. So it doesn't code for any DNA within the virus that would cause COVID or anything like that. It doesn't code for that. It's only coding for the spike protein on the outside. That spike protein, once it is translated and it goes to the Golgi body, it will be folded in order to make its correct shape. Now, the moment its correct shape is made, the cell suddenly realizes, oh my goodness, I have made a foreigner, and that then stimulates an immune response. And obviously during the immune response, the body will then learn what the virus looks like on the outside and is then able to fight against it should it invade the body again. Now, having explained that, there are some interesting theories that have been going around about the COVID-19 vaccine. I do have to say here that this is not a sponsored video. I'm just trying to encourage people to choose what is healthy and best for them, and obviously trying to provide some scientific evidence regarding vaccines, not to force you to take the vaccine, but to help you understand rather than buy into theories that are unscientific. So the first theory I want to address is the idea that the vaccine can alter your DNA. For those of you who are taking A-level biology, I bet this could be a question in the exam because it really tests your understanding of how mRNA, protein synthesis, DNA replication, and all of those other processes occur. So first things first, you must note that the mRNA cannot enter the nucleus where the DNA is stored. This is what the human cell or the animal cell looks like typically. Animal cells, including human cells, all look like this. And if you look here, I want you to look over here where it says nucleus. You can see there's a nuclear pore. I'll explain what that is. You have a nucleolus, you have a nucleoplasm, and you have a nuclear envelope. This is usually closed. Obviously, it's been opened in this drawing, but it's usually closed. And it's inside here that the DNA sits. The DNA is never able to leave the nucleus. So there is no way for it to go and encounter anything that would change it outside of the nucleus, if that makes sense. It doesn't leave the nucleus. But the most important thing that you also must know is that mRNA itself can never enter the nucleus. RNA polymerase, the enzyme that makes RNA, is able to enter the nucleus, make a copy of the DNA, convert it to RNA, and that RNA would leave through these pores that are here, but the RNA is never able to come back. When the RNA leaves through the pores, again, like we saw on the previous slide, it would go to the ribosomes, like you can see over here. The ribosomes would translate whatever the code is. So let's say, for example, you have this code on the mRNA. This is methionine, I believe. You have this code on the mRNA. It will translate it into amino acids, okay? And then those amino acids are folded into a protein within the Golgi body, and they are then excreted out of the body. So mRNA cannot enter the nucleus, and if it can't enter the nucleus when it's injected into your body, it cannot alter your DNA. The second one is that the vaccine is causing COVID variants. This is not true. COVID variants usually happen because of mutations when a vaccine is replicating. And obviously, because so many of us are yet to be immune against the COVID-19 virus, because we've never had it, it's a new form of virus that we're experiencing, it means the virus has room to replicate itself. And as it replicates itself, the more it is able to do that, the more it's able to spread around and replicate itself within the body, it will have what we call mutations or errors in copying. Now, those errors in copying can result in the virus changing. And so when it changes, that's why we have the variants that we have, like the alpha variant, the beta variant, and now we're dealing with the delta variant. So the vaccine is not the reason why COVID variants are happening. As a matter of fact, being vaccinated quickly can result in immunity and perhaps reduce the spread of variants. But the good thing is that variants will occur, or the gist rather, not the good thing. The gist is that variants will occur irrespective of whether or not there is a vaccine. So it is important for us to all get vaccinated quickly though, because it can help with herd immunity. So the last theory that I just want to speak about is that vaccines are designed to kill people. This is definitely not true. As I showed on the earlier slides, there are diseases that have been controlled and even eradicated by using vaccines. There are vaccines for tuberculosis, for cervical cancer, which is caused by the human papillomavirus. There are vaccines for genital warts, for diphtheria, even for tetanus. There are flu vaccines that people get every year. And so many people who have taken these vaccines are still alive and well, and that's because vaccines are not designed to kill. That obviously does not mean that people don't have side effects to vaccines. People do have side effects, but that is not based necessarily on the vaccine, but can be a result of people's underlying health conditions or even allergy profiles. There are people whose allergy profiles cause them to react to certain materials within the vaccine and can then result in a response that is not desired. So the idea that vaccines are designed to kill is not true. Vaccines are designed to train your immune system's memory so that when you do encounter the real thing, your body is ready to fight and to stage the secondary response, like I explained on the previous video. So that's the idea. And obviously just also pointing out that many of the vaccines that we have on the market are being made by companies that make many of the other drugs that we take, and those other drugs also have side effects that have been triggered in people even without their knowledge, and in some cases people have side effects and they just don't even know it because they're not as severe. So vaccines are not designed to kill people. They're designed to help the immune system so that it is able to fight against a virus. So the very last one, this is the last one I promise that I need to add, is that vaccines don't offer any protection. And people base this on the idea that, well, if you get vaccinated, you can still catch COVID. Well, that doesn't mean the vaccine is not working. The fact that your immune system has learned about a virus and has encountered it before does not mean it will never encounter it again. Think about the fact that you can get the flu this year, your immune system learns about it, but you can get the flu again in a couple of months, actually. So even though your immune system has learned, the virus or the pathogen is still able to infect your body. What makes the difference is that your immune system has learned how that virus operates, how it looks, and is then able to fight against it on reinfection. So don't buy into the idea that vaccines don't offer any protection. They're just things that are made for the fun of it. That's not true. They are made to offer you protection, to train your immune system, and to make it more resilient in dealing with any pathogen that would then infect you in future. So for example, with COVID, we know that COVID is spreading and there are variants that are spreading. And obviously, if you get vaccinated, it doesn't mean you will never, ever, ever get COVID again. But what it does mean is that it gives your immune system a fighting chance to help you survive if you are infected the next time. So I hope that you find that helpful. So just on a parting note, I just want to let you know that vaccines can help to achieve herd immunity, but only if a significant portion of the population is vaccinated. If people don't want to be vaccinated, obviously nobody should force them. They can't be forced, but it is also important to understand from the scientific perspective that the more people get vaccinated and the quicker they do it, then it is a lot easier for a country or a region to reach herd immunity and for life to return to normal as soon as possible. So I'll end this presentation here, and I hope that you found it helpful. If you're not a biology person, I hope that the explanations were clear. And for those of you who are taking biology in the exams, I hope this was some kind of revision with an application lens of how vaccines work, and also just understanding the whole mRNA process and how it helps with building immunity. So I'm going to part here, and again, just want to say this is not a sponsored video. I am not running a campaign to get people microchipped. I am not working for Bill Gates, and I'm also certainly not working for Pfizer. I am a scientist who has a BSc and a PhD, and I am just sharing what I know about vaccines and encouraging people to choose the healthy option for themselves. All right, I'll leave it here. Have a good time, everyone. Until the next video, goodbye.